Hi, Chad Heimlich here with Versamatic pumps. Today we're going to show you how to install an air side kit into an E2 metallic clamp. The same techniques are used for an E3 metallic clamp pump. And also out front we have examples of a wet end kit, complete air end kit, pilot valve kit that are all used within these pumps. The rebuild you're going to see is accurate and man method and machine, but for video purposes, some parts of the work performed have been condensed in time. At any point during the presentation, please pause this video until you have completed any part of the rebuild. Identifying which kit is required for your repair has become easier on newer pumps, with the permanently affixed metal serial number tag that now indicates the wet end and air end kit information for the pump. Kit information can also be found in the service and operating manual. Versamatic genuine replacement parts, wet end and air end kits provide a bill of material of the components included in the kit. All items included in the kits are components that Versamatic recommends replacing when rebuilding a pump. The pump we are using today is an example of the ease of installation. Always consult your respective service and operating manual before performing any maintenance on your pump. Service and operating manuals include composite repair parts drawings, repair parts list, and torque specifications. The pump we are using in this presentation has been built new and is considerably easier to work with than a pump that has been used in a process. Additional time may be required in preparation and separation of parts and components during the rebuild. While the pumps are different in size and flow, the techniques and procedures used in the rebuild of the E2 pump are also applied to the commonality of the E3. These are the recommended tools used with the rebuild. While the sizes may change based on the model, the type will remain the same. Torque wrench, ratchet, small slotted screwdriver, O-ring pick, snap ring pliers, 12-inch pry bars, sockets and or wrenches, 9/16 inch, 11/16 inch, 1 5/16 inch 6-point socket, 5/32 inch socket head Allen wrench. Okay, let's get started. Today we're going to use a 3/8 impact gun just for ease of disassembly and reassembly. First we're going to take off the discharge manifold. Remove the discharge manifold and set aside for later reassembly. Remove the discharge check balls and valve seats. Remove the air valve assembly. Set aside for later rebuild. We're turning the pump upside down so we have a flat surface to work off of. Removing the suction manifold. Set the suction manifold aside. Remove the valve seats and check balls. Now remove clamp assembly on the water chambers. Remove the water chamber on one side. Now remove the water chamber on the opposite side. Hold one diaphragm assembly while ratcheting off the opposite diaphragm assembly. Once one diaphragm assembly is removed, set aside our outer plates, diaphragm, remove the inner plate, and the sealing O-ring. Remove the plastic washer. Now remove the opposite diaphragm assembly that is attached to the rod.
Remove the inner chamber and set aside for later reassembly. This also allows us to service the pilot valve assembly. Remove the bumper O-ring so we can remove the pilot spool. Remove the main shaft O-ring. Now we're able to press out the pilot spool. Remove the snap ring from the pilot sleeve. Once this is done on one side, go ahead and pull out the pilot spool. Remove the main shaft O-ring. Remove the air chamber to access the pilot sleeve in the air chamber gasket. Now remove the pilot sleeve. Older E2 models may require scraping to remove the compressed fiber gasket. Now we're ready to install our complete airing kit. Now we can remove the pilot sleeve O-rings. Once our pilot sleeve O-rings are removed and discarded, inspect the pilot sleeve for any damage or wear. Replace as needed. Install the pilot sleeve O-rings into the accepted O-ring groove. Once the O-rings are installed, apply grease to the pilot sleeve O-rings. Grease is applied to keep the items from catching, binding, or cutting while assembling components. Now remove the pilot spool O-rings and discard. Inspect the pilot spool for any wear or damage and replace as needed. Install the new pilot spool O-ring starting from one end. Leave one bumper O-ring off. This is due to installation purposes. Apply grease to the center block that accepts the pilot sleeve. Locate the side that has the chamfer that accepts the pilot sleeve. Slowly install the pilot sleeve and twist to ensure we do not roll, damage, or nick any of the O-rings during installation. Fully seat the pilot sleeve up against the center block. Notice on the opposite side the groove that accepts the snap ring. Fully seat the snap ring into the groove to ensure the pilot sleeve is secure. Apply grease to the pilot spool O-rings to ensure we do not roll, nick, or damage any of the O-rings during installation. Install the end of the pilot spool that does not have the bumper O-ring. Slowly twist and turn and install the pilot spool into the pilot sleeve. Now install the main shaft O-ring. Apply grease to the main shaft O-ring. And repeat the process on the opposite side. Now we're ready to install our bumper O-ring on the opposite side. When installing the center block gasket, be sure to align all porting holes and bolt holes. Repeat this process or the opposite side. Now we install the air chamber. Note the alignment of the bolt holes and porting on the air chamber and lining it up with the center block. Be sure to torque the air chamber bolts according to factory specifications listed in the service manual. Now we're ready to install our opposite air chamber. Repeat this process on the second side. We will apply a little grease to the main shaft to ensure we do not damage the main shaft O-ring. Seat the diaphragm into the air chamber groove. Now we're ready to install our opposite diaphragm assembly. Install the plastic washer on the opposite side. The inner diaphragm plate radius will face towards the air side of the diaphragm. Install our sealing O-ring. Note the air side of the diaphragm will go towards the inner plate. In this case, it's natural bulge out. We're going to invert the diaphragm. And begin to thread on our outer plate. Once the diaphragm outer plate has been threaded onto the rod, holding one diaphragm assembly and torquing the second side to the rod. Now we're ready to install our outer chamber. Inspect the outer chamber for casting integrity. Inspect the machine surfaces and radius of the chamber for damage or material buildup. Scarring, scratching, or material buildup can be cleaned up using emery paper, crocus cloth, or fine sandpaper. Ensure the radius on the inside of the chamber is maintained during cleanup. Chamber orientation requires the discharge side of the chamber to be installed in the same direction as the air valve face on the center block. Go ahead and get your clamps started onto the outer chamber and inner chamber. Be sure to seat it fully. Bring the clamps close together as possible so we can get our bolts started holding our large clamp assembly. Go ahead and install our bolts. We don't want to torque or tighten our clamp assembly completely just yet. Now we'll install the opposite outer chamber. For ease of installation, we're using two 12-inch pry bars and get up underneath the inner diaphragm plate to shift the diaphragm assembly across. Be sure to align the pry bar up underneath the inner diaphragm plate so we do not damage the diaphragm. Gently pry it across. Once it has been shifted across, you can roll the diaphragm, seating the outer bead into the air chamber. Now we're ready to install our opposite outer chamber. Inspect the outer chamber for casting integrity. Inspect the machine surfaces and radius of the chamber for damage or material buildup. Scarring, scratching, or material buildup can be cleaned up using emery paper, crocus cloth, or fine sandpaper. Ensure the radius on the inside of the chamber is maintained during cleanup. Replace the chamber if necessary. Chamber orientation requires the discharge side of the chamber to be installed in the same direction as the air valve face on the center block. Be sure to align both outer chambers. Press on one clamp half and the opposite clamp half. Be sure to seat them fully so we can get the bolts started on the clamps. Go ahead and throw down the bolts, but do not tighten as of yet, as we need to align the outer chambers. Note that the outer chambers are not completely aligned just yet. Make sure you have a flat surface so we can align the chambers. You may need to use a rubber mallet to adjust the chambers and ensure that they are both level with each other. This will ensure proper sealing surface against the suction and discharge manifolds. Note they're nice and flat on the table. Now we're ready to tighten our large clamps. There is no torque spec required for the large clamps. Tighten the clamps evenly to ensure proper sealing. Now we're ready to install our suction manifold. We want to inspect the manifold for scarring, damage, or material buildup. Check the casting for wear. Check the port for thread integrity. Repair or replace as needed. When installing the valve seats, ensure that the O-ring portion of the valve seat faces down fully install the valve seat into the suction manifold. Now install our center section on top of our suction manifold. Be sure we have proper alignment between the outer chambers and the suction manifold. Orientation of the manifold is based on process requirements and may be reinstalled in either direction. Once alignment is achieved, we're ready to install our small clamps and tighten down evenly. Take note that there is no torque value for the small clamp assembly. Now we're ready to rebuild our air valve assembly. Remove our end caps. Once our end caps are removed, remove the valve spool. And begin to remove the glide ring assembly. Remove the glide rings and the O-rings underneath the glide rings. And inspect the integrity of the air valve spool. Ensure there are no scarring, scratching of the air valve spool. Remove the air valve sleeve. Remove the old valve sleeve O-rings and discard. Once the valve sleeve O-rings have been removed, inspect the integrity of the air valve sleeve and replace as needed. When installing the air valve sleeve O-rings, ensure that they are installed in the O-ring grooves of the sleeve. Inspect the casting. No casting defects or damage, and replace as needed. Inspect the air inlet screen for any dirt or debris. Once the air valve sleeve O-rings are installed, apply grease to ensure that we do not damage, roll, nick any of the O-rings when installing to the air valve body. Grease can also be applied to the air valve body. Once the O-rings are installed, apply grease to ensure that we do not damage, roll, nick any of the O-rings when installing to the air valve body. Grease can also be applied to the air valve body. Gently install and turn the main air valve sleeve into the body. Now we're ready to install our glide ring assembly. First, by installing the O-rings onto the main air valve spool. Once the O-rings are installed, we put the glide ring over top of the O-ring. When installing the air valve spool, be sure to compress the glide ring assemblies as you press in the spool into the air valve sleeve. This will ensure we do not damage any of the glide ring assemblies. Check to make sure the air valve spool moves freely within the sleeve. Now we'll install the end cap gasket. Be sure the porting holes and the bolt holes are aligned when installing the end cap gasket. The same is done when installing the end cap. Be sure to torque the end cap bolts to the torque specification listed in the service manual. You'll want to repeat this process for the second air cap. Once our air valve assembly is rebuilt, install our air valve screen. Now we're going to install our air valve gasket. Be sure the alignment of the air valve gasket is installed properly. Once it is aligned, go ahead and tighten down the air valve bolts and torque according to factory specifications in a cross pattern. Now we can install valve seats on our discharge side. Ensure the O-ring of the seat is facing down into the water chamber and the flat surface is towards the check ball. We want to inspect the manifold for scarring, damage, or material buildup. Check the casting for wear. Check the port for thread integrity. Repair or replace as needed. Emery paper, crocus cloth, or fine sandpaper can be used to clean the manifold up. Orientation of the manifold is based on process requirements and may be reinstalled in either direction. Ensure the discharge manifold is properly aligned with the water chambers. Now we're ready to install our small clamp assembly. Tighten the small clamp assemblies evenly to ensure proper sealing.